Welcome back to the MOOC course on research writing. My name is Aradhana Malik and I'm helping you with this course. And we've been talking about various things. We talked about literature review. We talked about how you collect reviews. Now in this, or how you read up whatever it is that you read up for your research. Now in this class, what we will do is we are going to start discussing how you start your writing process. And so before you embark on even research writing, there are a few things that I think you should know about writing as such, writing anything, and of course I'll tie it in with research writing. So let's see what we have here for you. Now, as a person living in India, as an Indian who has studied English and a number of other languages, I think I consider it my responsibility to share a few concerns with you. And my concerns here are that in India, English is the common language of the educated Indian. And that is why we use English for research. It is the language that educated Indians use. It is the language that we communicate in, despite our differences, despite our cultural differences, despite our linguistic differences, despite the diversity in the country. English and Hindi are two languages that tie us together. In fact, Hindi is the national language, and English has slowly come to be accepted as a lingua franca in many states. So these two languages tie us with each other. Now, English is also the language of the international research community. It is a common language of the international research community, and that is why knowing how to write papers, knowing how to write your research in English is very important. It is also one of the most common languages of electronic communication, which in turn is our window to the rest of the world, which in turn is our window to whatever is happening in the rest of the world. So that is why we need to learn English. If all this was happening, if the internet had been developed by two Germans, we would probably, all of us would have been speaking in German by now. But the internet was developed by people, English speaking people, and then the internet of course brought with it an information boom, and so with the result, and of course it spread, the internet spread in different parts of the world. Now of course we have local languages, internet in local languages also, but in order to stay in touch with the rest of the world, we need to use the English language. I have nothing to say in favor of the language or against it. It's just a tool that we use to share what we have done, to share our additions to the knowledge base with the rest of the academic and research community in the rest of the world. Okay. Now, for most Indians, English is a second or third or fourth language. In India, most people use English, Hindi, and at least one other regional language. So most of us in India are trilingual. Most of us are trilingual. English is a foreign language for most Indians. There is no shame in admitting one's limitations with this foreign language. And since you plan to compete with the best nationally and internationally, you need to diagnose your limitations and work towards overcoming them. So many people who feel restricted with the use of English, or who feel uncomfortable because of the English language, because of the use of English language, need to start overcoming this limitation. It's just a tool. It's like saying that you're an engineer, but you have trouble using a screwdriver. Okay, so that is what I mean. It's a tool that we use for our work. So we acknowledge all of these things and we move towards learning how to write and how to use the language properly. Okay, some resources that I can refer to you here, or refer you to, are these. Let me show you. Bogazici University is based in, it's in Trinidad and Tobago, and the good part, I selected this online writing lab because this is especially for students who use several other languages. So it's very interesting, how you write grammar, paragraph development, writing exercises, essay types. Again, we need to have a control over this language that we are going to be using before we can jump into research writing. Okay, so you can go through these different online writing labs that we have. Then there is the writing tutorial services on the internet by Indiana University. Again, very interesting, and you can go through these doctoral dissertations and proposals, how to write a thesis statement, paragraphs and topic sentences, etc., etc., etc. So all kinds of writing resources are given here. Then some of us struggle with grammar. I still have my class 10 grammar book on my table in case I get stuck, in case I get confused. I still pick up that class 10 grammar book and refer to it. We used to have a book by Wren and Martin, and I still have a copy of that because it's so useful. Another book is by Michael Swan. So I'll give you all these references and you can use them. I'll post them on the forum when the forum is active. So it's very important to use the language accurately, appropriately, and so, you know, in order to get your point across. Another resource here is this Guide to Grammar and Style by Jack Lynch. Very helpful. Then there's another one. This is the one that I have been referring to extensively, the Purdue Online Writing Lab. Okay, so you'll see in a lot of places I've written Purdue OWL wherever I have explained certain things. Now this is material from the online writing lab that I'm trying to share with you. Then there is another book, The Elements of Style by William Strunk, and this book was initially published in 1918 and then republished in 1999. So an old book but very helpful. Okay, here the contents are here. Okay, Elements of Style. Then The King's English by H.W. Fowler. So you can download these books. These are free of cost. Again, this book was published in 1908, more than 100 years ago. Okay, so this book was published 109 years ago, and you can, or 110 years ago by the time this course is aired. So this book is again available for free download. So you can download the book and you can go through it. You know, this is again on grammar. So very nice books, and of course in addition to these, this list is by no means exhaustive. But this is very essential for people who struggle with this monster called the English language. Okay. All right. Now, why do we write? We write to record the journey that we have undertaken as researchers. We write to add detail to our work. We write for documentation or proof of the work we have done. It's also an aid to memory. It helps us reconstruct past events. It helps us establish knowledge, notice, or intent of the organization or individual at a relevant time. So you write for various reasons. Now, some elements of good writing, again this is by a paper from a paper by John Fielden, and elements of good writing. The first element of good writing is readability. You need to judge the complexity and the abstractness of the material you are dealing with and cut your sentences down in those areas that are especially difficult to grasp, and these should be cut down to match the level of the reader. These should be, you need to pay attention to the sentence construction, the paragraph construction, familiarity of words, and you also need to direct the reader to whatever it is that you're trying to say, and you need to maintain the focus of the paper. So readability depends on all of these factors. The level of the reader. Now, if you're writing a research paper, again for publication in a, let's start with various things. So you write a research proposal. Now, the purpose of a research proposal is to prove your point of view and to convince the readers to allow you to A, conduct the research, 2, maybe even fund your research. Okay, so as a researcher, so again the reader's level is much higher than yours. Why? Because there are people who are senior to you. They know much more about what it is that you're writing. So use of jargon would be very appropriate here because they are expected to know what these terms mean. However, when you're writing, say, a working paper for circulation within your own organization, Then working papers are usually works in progress, and the purpose of a working paper is to get feedback from people who read it, so your work can be improved and eventually published. Now when we talk about a working paper, then some jargon, some explanation, lot of descriptions, lot of definitions, and some open-ended questions can be there. You need not tie all loose ends. You can leave certain ends loose so that you get feedback in order to stimulate feedback from the readers. The same goes for conference presentations. You're writing a paper for presentation at a conference. You share it. Yes, you need to share whatever it is that you have done. However, the primary purpose of conference presentations is again to get a lot of feedback on different kinds of feedback on the work that you're doing. So it's primarily for works in progress and occasionally to demonstrate the good work that you're doing so you can make networks and all. However, the physical presence of the academic community from a particular field in a particular place can actually get you ideas that you may not have been able to think of yourself. So in that case also, it is not necessary to tie all loose ends. How, you'll say in that case our papers will not get accepted. They will, if whatever you have done has merit in its own and you are actively seeking feedback, then your papers will get accepted. But the idea is, one, to showcase what you have done, and two, to get feedback on what it is that you're intending to do with whatever you have done. So the way you write those papers will also be different. You are expecting the readers to be of a certain level. They will not have very much time. The space may be very limited for conference presentations. The size of the papers is very, very limited as compared to the prescribed size for presentation in journals, as compared to your doctoral dissertation, which gives you enough freedom to take one, to write the story of how you have created a piece of knowledge over the past several years. So you may be given 150 to 200 to maybe even 500 words wherever, depending on the place you're at. So you can really go into detail. So now again, the readability will depend on who is going to read your document, the sentence construction, how complicated the sentences are, how easy they are. You can't have too easy sentences in your research documents. They can't also be very, very difficult so that nobody understands them. They need to be of an appropriate size. Then again, paragraph construction. Where do you start your paragraphs? How do you end them? Every paragraph ideally should have a heading. Every paragraph should have a focus. Familiarity of words, jargon, reader direction. What do you want the reader to think next? Where do you want the reader to go after reading paragraph A? And the focus. Does whatever you're saying tie in with the main theme, main title of the paper? So all that is very, very important. Then correctness. This is absolutely essential in research writing. So it's critical that whatever you present is correct. Accuracy of information. Very, very, very important. Unless you present accurate information, you cannot build true knowledge, and unless you build that knowledge, you can't expect others to take that knowledge and build on the knowledge that you have created. So accuracy of information is absolutely critical to writing a good research document. Then mechanics, grammar and punctuation. I mean, you'll say this is school stuff. It's not, because many of us, like I said, struggle with English as a second or third or fourth language, and sometimes it becomes essential for us to get the help of professional editors, which is all right. So, but it's very important to have the mechanics right. The grammar should be accurate, because that in turn enhances the readability and the credibility, the believability. Somebody will believe that you were as serious about your research as you were in writing it if your grammar and punctuation are impeccable. Okay, so that is why it becomes very, very important. Then format, the appearance, standard writing style appropriate for respective discipline. Now, depending on the journal you submit this paper to, you could have different writing styles. Just this morning, I spent about 4 hours changing the referencing pattern to suit the needs of a specific journal that we are submitting a paper to. It was, we were scratching our heads. We had a long list of references, but we went, piece by piece, bracket by bracket, comma by comma. Why? Because readers of a particular journal are tuned to seeing things in a certain way. They want to see one thing in one place and another in another place. So we'll talk more about it when we talk about referencing. So the format is critical. Then the journal has prescribed a format according to which the abstract should be written, according to which the tables should be drawn up, according to which the information or the main text has to be written. So just the formatting, we've got the meat in, but just the formatting is taking up so much time. But we need to adhere to those guidelines because, of course, the acceptability of our paper could depend on it. That is a logistical reason for it. But also because the readers of that particular journal are attuned to reading certain things written in a certain way, certain things placed at certain significant places in the document. So that's very, very important. The font size, the spacing, all of that is critical. The size, the margins, all of that becomes very, very critical. Then coherence, relationship of ideas to each other. We are talking about correctness here, so we are talking about adherence to certain guidelines, whether it's grammar, whether it is the ethics, ethical standards of research. We are talking about coherence also. Coherence is the relationship of ideas to each other. Which idea flows from which? Okay, how do you connect the ideas? Are they connected or are they free floating? Logical juxtaposition of ideas to each other. Superimposition is when you put one idea on top of another. Juxtaposition is when you lay them side by side. Okay, so when I say, okay, I want to write a paper on research writing. What is research writing? So I start with what is research, what is writing, and how do the two tie in with each other. I can't just start out by saying, okay, this is what is research, and then I talk about research writing, and then I switch to just writing per se. That will not be an accurate, that will those ideas will not be appropriately juxtaposed. However, if I say, okay, I start with either writing or research, and I say this is what writing is, this is what research is, and then I slowly start building the connections between the two, and I come to an understanding of what research writing is. Now that will be appropriate juxtaposition of ideas. Okay, so that's a logical juxtaposition of ideas to each other. So you're taking the reader from one side to another direction that you want the reader to go into. Okay, then thought. Thought refers to preparation, competence, fidelity to assignment, how much preparation has gone into it. When you're writing a research paper, you need to have reviewed the literature, you need to have knowledge of whatever has been done in the past. And how do you get that knowledge? By going through material that you have, or by going through other research. How much of preparation do you have? Do you have the competence to assess whatever it is that you're writing about? If I were to, if I were asked to write a paper on, say, engineering drawing, for example, I'm not an engineer and I don't know anything about drawing, and I don't know what I've heard about engineering drawing, I've seen engineering students do it, but if I were to teach engineering drawing, I would not have the competence for it. So I will not be asked to teach engineering drawing or even write a paper on it. So, how competent am I? Do I have the training? Do I have the right attitude for it? Do I have the aptitude for it? Can I learn? So, all of those things will go into your writing. Should you be writing about subjects that you don't know very much about? My answer is no. Not if you really want to kill your credibility. First, learn about the subject, delve into it, know enough about it, and once you write your first document, share it with several people, and only after you've tried and tested it should you venture into making it public. Very good place to test whether you're really competent in a subject or not is after you've learnt enough and you think you've done enough, take the paper and send it to a conference. In order for a paper to be accepted at a good conference, some of your competence in that area will be required. Otherwise, you will not be able to write a paper that can be accepted. Go to the conference and get lots of feedback. Be very open to feedback. Don't justify yourself. Just absorb everything like a sponge. Note everything down, incorporate all those suggestions, find out if you can get back or you can check back with some members of the audience. That's how you make networks. Go back and forth, have some mentors that you can check with, write the paper, and then eventually submit it. And after several deliberations, you could eventually emerge as an expert in that discipline. But you must prepare, test the waters, come back, prepare some more, test the waters again, come back, prepare some more, experiment, come back, prepare some more, and then go into it. So, that is how you build your competence, and that competence will be visible in how you write your papers. Fidelity to the assignment. Again, when you start writing the assignment, if you are not committed to it, it will show. Expert readers, people who read these papers day in and day out, will be able to see the difference between a well written assignment or a well written or a well thought through paper and a paper that has not been thought through. Then analysis, thoroughness of examination of data. Has the data been analyzed thoroughly or not? Has the data been completely picked apart or not? Ability to draw conclusions. Presentation of conclusions. How have you drawn conclusions? Have you presented your conclusions in a way that they should be presented? Identification and justification of assumptions. Qualification of tenuous assertions. Tenuous assertions are at times we are stuck between two opposing points of view. How do you qualify them? How do you choose which way you want to go? Okay, and your biases. All of these things will feature in how you analyze whatever it is that you are writing about, and then all of this will then eventually reflect through what you have written about. So these are some of the elements of good writing that I would really like you to pay attention to. That is all. And of course, there's one more I forgot. So another element of good writing is appropriateness. Now, appropriateness, again, upward and downward communication, if relevant, tact, diplomacy, etc. Supporting detail. When we are talking about writing research documents, many times we tend to put in either too much detail or we immediately jump to conclusions. Now, that is not acceptable. When we write research documents, jumping to conclusions without qualifying them, without justifying them is not acceptable. So, you may have either too much supporting detail or too little supporting detail, both of which are not appropriate. Then your opinions. In research documents, you cannot let your opinions interfere too much. So when we talk about research documents, your arguments need to be based on sound logic or past research or your own experiments. But you can't just say, in my opinion, or this is how I feel. No, that does not qualify as research. Too few facts to entitle drawing of conclusions. At times you have very few facts, but again you're jumping to conclusions. You've not conducted enough or you've not collected enough data. Presence of unasked for but clearly implied recommendations. However, when we talk about unasked for but clearly implied recommendations, we are talking primarily about the intuitive issues that come up. So many times, in order to just add meat to our papers, we write down things that may be too obvious. So instead of doing that, that can really lead the reader to think that you are biased towards things that may just seem obvious. Now, the style again makes a difference, and that again connects to the appropriateness or is a part of the appropriateness. What kinds of words you choose, what tone you use, the length of sentences, etc. Again, that's part of readability. It's also part of appropriateness, because in research documents, the words you choose, the tone you use, you cannot be biased in favor of something or biased against something or use too many adjectives. So when you use too many adjectives, the tone becomes, or the inclination becomes flowery, the language becomes flowery, and that is not really acceptable in research documents. Similarly, the length of sentences, where necessary, may be long, but in most cases it should be short, and it should be direct, and it should be devoid of any emotion or opinion or objectives to the extent possible. When we talk about qualitative research, we are exploring the interaction of the researcher with the research issue. So that becomes very, very different. So all of this then adds up to the appropriateness. So the level of communication, the detail, the opinion and the style, all of these contribute to the appropriateness. And when you're writing, you must pay attention to all of these factors. And then, after you've written, you must revise. Now there's one thing that I will not put on the slides that I want you all to know. When we start writing a document, we must accept that anything that we write will go through a number of revisions. If you are a PhD student, please be prepared for at least 40 to 50 revisions of your final dissertation, minimum. Please do not get flustered when you get feedback. Please do not get upset. Please don't lose faith. Do not lose hope. We've all gone through this. It is very, very essential that you revise your document at least 40 to 50 times before the final submission. Only then will your document become acceptable. Okay. It is and you go through the document once, then you sleep over it, you get feedback, you incorporate the feedback, you go through it again, you sleep over it, you incorporate the feedback once again, keep revising it till it is as flawless as can be. Again, you all have to meet deadlines, so my suggestion is that if you have deadlines, please finish the work at least 60% of the time or within 60% of the time, and keep the rest of the time for revisions. Only then will your work become acceptable in the academic community. If you leave everything till the last minute, then you won't be able to meet your deadlines or come out with a good quality work. Everybody has to do it. So, when we talk about good writing, you can use the elements that have just been discussed to see where your paper fits in, and then keep cutting and pruning your document till it really becomes something worth reading or worth submitting to an international, or worth submitting preferably to an international journal of top quality. So on that note, I will end the discussion here. We will continue with some more discussion on research writing in the next class. Thank you very much for listening.